Welcome to Successful Parenting, where we, Jackie Rue and Robin Choquette, share practical skills for families to build resilience and healthy connections. As practicing professionals and parents ourselves, we hope this podcast is a resource for parents to grow, reflect, and learn more about themselves and their children. Our approach is simple, tangible, and most importantly, we lead with compassion for the integrity of the families we serve. This podcast should not be taken as medical advice and is intended for informational purposes only. We love our work, and we can't wait to watch families gain confidence and open themselves up to new ways of successful parenting.
Hey, Robin, how's it going?
It is good. I'm here.
Okay, shouldn't you be?
Well, did you remember what I had this week?
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right. You had jury duty.
Yes. So I don't know if this is right or wrong. I was completely honest, Jackie. I didn't make anything up. I basically sent them, here's my request, and this is the reason why. I have a doctor's appointment that, it takes months to get into the doctor. We're recording podcasts. And I sent screenshots of our calendar invites and people saying, yes, they'll be there. And then I had a presentation with the United States Youth Soccer Association, the Women's Alliance. I screenshotted part of that. I kind of bombarded them with all this information of why I really couldn't do it this week. And then I said, I'll do it the following week, like 2 weeks in December. I gave them two alternatives and they deferred it. So I'm really happy. I don't have a new date, but they let me defer it. I'm so happy.
Robin, that is some interesting stuff.
I was stressed. Remember how stressed you were like, worry about it. Don't worry about it. And I'm like, oh my God.
I know. Well, and I think that's partly because every time I've gotten called for jury duty, and I don't know if it's a reflection on me, but I've never been picked up. So even the one time I went to check in, they looked at me and, 5 minutes later, they were like, you can go home. So I'm glad that you got called out and, showing them all of your appointments. I think that is actually a good way to go. So if any listeners on here have jury duty, show them your calendar and you will be let free. Although we are not on this podcast condoning getting out of jury duty because we feel it is very important. And if you have jury duty, you should be there.
Yes. And if you can't make that week, then you give alternative dates. And that's what I did to say, I will do it. I wasn't doing a blanket, just get me out of here. It was, I will do it. I just can't do it this week. So that is what I did. So anyway, Jackie, interesting story because today we have an attorney with us and we have two ladies that work in the world of family law. And this is such an interesting concept. I met Emily back in 2003. And some of the things that people will describe when they're talking to me about Emily is she can be tenacious and she can also be very kind. One person said she's an amazing attorney, and the reason why I know that, I had a great attorney, and she was my ex-wife's attorney, and said she is good. Sum it all up, she really listens to her clients and tries to meet their needs and what they want in this process. And I just think that is such a great place that she comes from in the world of family law and really supporting. Our other guest expert today is Tammy Hildenbrandt, and I have not met Tammy, although Emily and I have talked a couple times and she's talked to me about Tammy and how great she is. So I am so excited to have both of these ladies here on our podcast today. Welcome, Emily and Tammy.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome. And Emily, let me just start with you. Tell us a little bit about your journey to practice law, specifically like family law. What brought you to want to work in that arena?
Well, so I've known since I was 16 years old that I wanted to be a divorce attorney. So when I was 16, my parents were going through a divorce, and it was a terrible situation. It was in a county where they were stuck in the court system for years. I always thought there was a better way that they could have done this. I could have done something different. And so from 16 until now, I always knew that I was going to do family law, and I've not done anything since family law. I've been practicing quite a few years. I don't like to say how many because then it reminds me how old I am. But family law is, I think, where you can make the biggest difference in families when you're talking about the legal realm. And I think that it's, having personal experience really helps me relate to clients and to help them guide them through the process.
Well, and I think it's so interesting because I work with a lot of family lawyers in my practice. I do, reunification counseling. I work with a lot of guardian ad litems. And so I so appreciate how challenging it must be at times just to kind of navigate all the different needs and wants of every family member, really just trying to ensure that, especially the children are in the best place and healthy. So I so appreciate your perspective today.
Oh, great.
I was looking some information up and came across this in Psychology Today, and they were talking about children really suffer when there's conflict and when there's fighting and argument. It's not about divorce or no divorce. It's about how the couple is working through it. And I think one interesting aspect of collaborative law, and I want us to kind of get into that, Tammy is a part of that process. So looking at your resume, you're a licensed clinical social worker, you meditation teacher, you're a certified Phoenix Rising yoga therapist. Tell us a little bit about your story and why you came into the world of divorce mediator and child specialist.
Yeah, thank you. So similar to Emily, like I always knew I wanted to be a counselor, and my parents were divorced and always thought I can help families do this better, right? And about 6 years into being in private practice, I started getting a lot of referrals from a judge who was sending me all of these really high conflict families. And after a while, after doing some reunification therapy and family therapy and co-parenting therapy, he asked me to, hey, can you get your mediator certification? Because where I was working at the time, there were very few mediators that were also therapists. I got my mediator certification and then, got my collaborative certification and then started working both with the litigated clients and then also as a mediator and a child specialist and collaborative. And then throughout that process, I started to realize, talk therapy, I think only touches the healing process so much. It takes clients far, but I was also recognizing that a lot of the people I was counseling, they still have really high levels of anxiety and some trauma and depression. And so then I went on to get training to be a meditation teacher and a somatic bodywork therapist and yoga therapist so that, in the moment I can teach clients to how to self-regulate. And if you're anxious, here's how you can use your breath and bring some mindfulness to a really difficult conversation. And that has really made a huge difference in helping individuals and families navigate divorce in a different kind of way.
That's so interesting. What have you found to be one of the challenges of your job? Just as you were hearing that, you have so many different aspects that you're dealing with.
I think one of the biggest challenges, specifically what you brought up at the beginning, it's sometimes, I think as a mom, and as a professional, kind of interviewing and working with kids who are struggling, because we know as an adult, okay, it doesn't have to be this way. And we can intervene with the parents or give suggestions. And sometimes it really works and sometimes it doesn't, right? Sometimes at the end of the day, you work with some of these kids and it's just like, oh gosh, just wish that the process could be better for them.
Yeah, for
Right.
sure. For sure.
Absolutely.
Emily, I just had a question for you. We see that there's some statistics out that, an estimated 41% of first marriages end in divorce was one study we saw. And then, that number can even go up for second marriages and for third marriages. I know you probably have some thoughts on that. It's interesting. And I just wanted to kind of hear what you're seeing.
So those statistics are absolutely correct. And I thought even first marriages, I thought they were up to 50% now, but I like the 41% better. So I think that it has to do with, and I think it's one of the most important things that happens when people are going through divorce, they need to go into counseling themselves and break some of the habits and some of the people that they are attracted to, meaning that that's why the number goes up for second marriages and third marriages, because they're just getting into another relationship that's exactly like their first one and they're not breaking the cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. And you state, Emily, you've noted that throughout your practice that you found that many divorces can be resolved by using pathways such as alternate dispute resolution. Can you explain to us those pathways and collaborative divorce?
Absolutely. So throughout my career, it has been mostly litigation. In the past 2 to 3 years, I have focused more on collaborative divorce and mediation. So to explain those, mediation is where I would sit down with a couple. I cannot give them legal advice, but I guide them to a solution that is best for their families. And it's all goal and solution based, meaning that They might pick something that's completely out of the ordinary and not what a judge would do, but that's what works for their families. I can guide them in the mediation process, but I cannot give them legal advice. Then if you look at collaborative divorce is something that I think almost every family should utilize in a divorce situation. And that's where my client would be represented by me. The opposing party would have their counsel, and we actually sign a contract that says that we're not going to litigate, and that if you do litigate, the attorneys have to withdraw from your case. So it really ties people to the process, because you don't want to leave your attorney after you've spent so much time with them. And so what you do is you have a full and complete disclosure. Everything has to be transparent. And at the beginning, the first meeting that you have, you set goals and what your goals are through this process. And usually those goals are to have the least impact on my family, to put our kids first. And so when things start to get tense, then we bring the parties back to their goals, right? And so it's a team basis on collaborative divorce. So it's not just the attorneys, it's people like Tammy, who would be the child specialist. We have financial specialists, divorce coaches. And so I always say it takes a village to get divorced. And this puts people in a fantastic position, meaning that you think, oh, I have all these people I have to pay. But each person specializes in each thing. So Tammy, you would specializes in working with the parties on working through a parenting agreement where they're not paying me, they're paying Tammy. And so I think it's the best, alternative for families.
Well, it gets them thinking in that collaborative way, because that's something Jackie and I talk a lot about when we're working with families that are separate homes. We will say, I will bet most of the time they have the same goal, but what they want and how they achieve it looks different. But the goal remains the same, right?
Correct.
And most of the time. And so if you can get them starting to think like that, I would imagine, and their parenting is going to continue to roll like that, and you see so much more success. Well, Tammy, tell me about the team of specialists, and you're in the process of helping them work on the it's left my brain. What's
the parenting agreement?
Parenting agreement.
Yes.
Yeah.
So often I will work with parents, and we will go through everything that needs to be in the final draft of their parenting agreement. And as part of that, ultimately, part of the process is helping them kind of unwind from this marital relationship to learning how to co-parent, which is a completely different type of interaction. And so we will talk about that. How is this going to look different? How do we communicate different? How are we going to start interacting different? And we will do that in that process. And oftentimes, as part of that, the result is they really start to uncouple in a very productive and I think healing way. And they're able to talk through some things. Certainly I'm not their marriage counselor, but we can start to talk about how does this move forward in a way that really keeps the children front and center and keeps the children's best interests in mind. And I think parents ultimately, even though they may look at things a little bit differently or have a different idea about things, when they can really focus on, okay, what is best for our children, they can really start to see how this co-parenting relationship can look moving forward.
Well, and I love how you both seem to really focus on that collaborative piece. What I find working with families when they are going through a divorce, it can be so challenging, right? There's so many emotions, there's so much grief, there's so much frustration, there's so much anger. And sometimes the families I work with, the parents have a hard time separating their own emotions from kind of what's best for the child. And I see that and time again. And it can be so hard when I'm working with families, even navigating, separating out those emotions, because, each person has such a different view of what's going on and what should happen. But I appreciate that you guys keep using words like collaborative and solution focused, and that really is a testament to your work.
Well, thank you. And I think something that Tammy and I talked about is that families really need to start counseling in the divorce process, not only to deal with all of the things that they're going through individually, but how it relates to the children and helping their children navigate through this. I think that is one of the most important things.
For families, we often see an increase in mental health problems prior, during, and after divorce. And I've noticed there's been a lot more higher incidents since and during the pandemic. Many families felt like, some of the conflict brewed with the shelter in place and whatnot. And so we've definitely noticed that. We also found a piece of research recently from coming out of Arizona State University that, really talks about children exposed to interparental conflict were more likely to report worrying about being abandoned by one or both of their parents. None of us are surprised by this research, but what have you found helps parents and families to be able to be goal aligned and help reduce some of the conflict and pain that comes with this journey?
I think for parents to try to stay out of court, to not have a judge decide what happens with your children, but have them decide as a couple what's best for their own children. I think that is the most important, because I have never seen a family really stay together after they've gone through litigation and determined which parent has custody. And so I think that study probably goes along those same lines where, if there's no co-parenting, then that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree, Emily. I think too, I always validate for each parent, that what they want and what they need is valid, but it's really about what do the children need? What's in the best interest of the children? Because that may match what the parents want and need, but most likely it's someplace in the middle, and they have to be able to meet in the middle in some of those things.
Well, and I don't know if you both ever run into this, but do you find sometimes that parents can get caught up in, we call it like the trap of even asking some leading questions about the other parent and things like that, and really just having to kind of set some boundaries of kind of what this work is going to look like and really what our goal is. And I reiterate often, right? Like our goal is really just about the child being adjusted and us making sure that the connections are healthy with both parents if possible.
I say it all the time. And I wish if I had $1 for every time I say it, but I always say it's not your time with the child. It's your child's time with you, because you have to focus on your kids, what makes them happy, not what makes you happy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I like that. So would you say if we can get folks from the very start of this process starting to think and get the mindset of being collaborative, we start to see this joining together in a way that they get it and their own emotional reactions or needs get met somewhere else? Is that what we're kind of seeing? And those individuals that are able to do it, is it you guys have to help guide them, or is it more they're kind of that type of person already?
I think you have to guide them for sure. Okay. I mean, there are people that are ready to do it, that are right off the bat ready to be collaborative and want to get this through as fast as possible. But there are families, a majority of them, who need assistance in getting to that point. And I think that's where we turn to Tammy and to others to help them get them through that process and get them to that point. Each parent on the divorce spectrum is at a different place. One parent might have thought about divorce for the last 5 years and is ready to go, where the other parent thought, well, our marriage was great. So you have to take the time, listen to each other, and then go through the process. And I think with collaborative law, that's really important, because here in Illinois, the Illinois Supreme Court has put deadlines on when cases need to be done. And in my experience, families, there is no specific timeline for families. Some families, it might be quick. Some families, it might take a while. So I think that is, one of the biggest hurdles.
What do you see, Tammy, in terms of getting them to join? And
yeah, I think I agree with Emily. And I think, there's been some parents that are, it's that it's easy, but you know what I mean? The process flows. And there's more parents that are in the process where there is some high conflict. And I always say, collaborative doesn't necessarily mean cooperative, but it doesn't mean that they won't get to the finish line and they won't get through it. And that's, I think, where the benefit of the team is, right? You have myself, a mental health professional, you have the attorneys, potentially a financial person, so they're kind of held in this space of they have people to ask questions. They have people to guide them legally. They have people to guide the questions about the finances, and then people to help manage their emotion and questions about the kids. And I think in that process and in the time that it does take, typically who they are as co-parents changes from where they started to where they finish.
Yeah.
Well, and that is so true. And I really think it is. And again, a lot of it is dealing with emotions. Some of it might be new and some might be further along. And then you add in when there's other relationships and, and I find that's where it gets a little tricky, but,
I would say a lot tricky.
A lot tricky. Yeah. And I think that's actually where it really does become a challenge. And I think I always try to validate too, right? As you both have said, yes, this is painful and emotional, but how do we really, what's our end goal here? And, we've talked a little bit about the pandemic, and it sounds like, there's also been some good that we've seen in terms of some of this, right? So yay for that. It looks like some of the research has talked about, even since the pandemic, 58% of married couples report that COVID-19 made them appreciate their partner more. 50% of American married couples say the pandemic has deepened their relationship. Are you seeing this in your practice, and are couples being less conflictual?
No, I'm seeing the exact opposite. So I think the remaining percentage of people that with COVID, they have now become super conflictual. Like it is out of control, I believe. I think it's been a time where people didn't feel heard, and now they're taking positions instead of, looking to goals and being solution focused. So I see the exact opposite. I say it has gotten much worse.
The other thing too that has come up across recently in front of me is that families are staying together because of financial reasons, and they're like living in the home but separated because they, moving into two homes is too much of a challenge right now. Have you seen that too?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And I find that can be really challenging for the kids. And a lot of times they're going through the process of divorce, but they stay together. And I had one recently, a year and a half, they stayed together working through the divorce. And it was really, really hard on the kids. Any advice on that?
I always tell parents, it's both love your children. And if the end goal is for them to be happy, healthy, relatively well-adjusted adults, you will allow and support and encourage and do everything you can do to make sure they have a good relationship with both parents. Right? Because the relationship between a couple is entirely different than a relationship between a child and a parent. And so you want your kids to love both of you unconditionally. And so how can we support that? Right? And can you separate out your anger, frustration, resentment towards your spouse from how your children feel about your spouse? And my experience is once parents start to get that, things flow much smoother.
Yeah, I would agree.
It's like changing that mindset and that understanding. It's almost once they get it and once they see it, I would imagine then that flip to thinking that way just seems to flow along.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's getting to them to that point, though, that can be really hard and take a lot of work. So
yeah. And I think it's interesting because when I think about, families I've worked with, it always seems so disjointed, are all different parties. But I love collaborative law where everyone's there together. It's this team approach, so much better. And everyone feels like they're being heard and it's addressed. And I really feel like that's kind of what you guys have tapped into.
Yes. And, one thing, that especially, with the economy and everything, people are like, well, I can't afford to get divorced right now. Well, if you pick up the collaborative process over the traditional litigation, it's going to save a family substantial resources because you're not litigating in court. As an attorney, I'm not required to go every month and give a status to the judge. And so that's something for families to think about as well.
Yeah.
Can you give us any suggestions to our listeners if they're, thinking, talking, or they're taking those steps in divorce? What would you say to them?
Tammy, I'll let you go first.
Yeah. So I would definitely, and I always say I'm biased in this answer, but you need to get into some counseling, just to have that support in the process, because even in the most amicable divorces, it's really difficult. And so I think just having counseling to understand your part in the end of the marriage, and then, how can you manage your own emotions and feelings? How can you be there to support your kids? And then what do you want to create moving forward? That's really important.
And I think one of the other things too is, if your children are not in counseling, then maybe that's when we start to get the kids into counseling. Yeah. And one of the things I always tell potential clients who come in, do not look on the internet. Google is not your friend. My doctor says the same thing to me, when you just don't want to Google it because there's misinformation out there. Right. And, I always say people going through the divorce process, knowledge is power. And so there are many attorneys that will sit down and just do a consultation with a party and explain the different options and explain kind of the steps to go through. And I find out that first meeting is usually the hardest. But then after that, once you know what to expect, just like in anything, it seems to go a little bit better.
Yeah, the one that I hear a lot of people talking about is Reddit, right? Is that the one?
Oh, yeah.
I saw on Reddit. Well, I had one
Right.
client, they were getting all their data from that. And I said, well, let's kind of step back and look at that. Like,
Mhm.
is that
Right.
truly the facts here? I agree with the Google thing. Okay, so we keep talking about being able to come together and be collaborative. And it comes to that conflict. Given all the work that you guys have done, what would you recommend for families to help to reduce that conflict during divorce?
I think, as Tammy said, it leads to, doing counseling, and, maybe, parents should, what they should do is take a breath. I always tell people to take a breath. What you're doing right now, how is that going to affect your kids? How is that going to affect your relationship with the other parent? So I always, to reduce conflicts, I think much of what probably Tammy does in her practice as well is try to talk through those issues with a friend, with a counselor, instead of attacking the other party.
100%. I love that you said that. I was just having this conversation this morning where a mom, not been married that long, but there's a ex-wife, and the mom was just venting about the ex-wife. And we look at what's the purpose between venting and problem solving, and even that, how that trickles down to the kids and our attitude and our approach and the way we, kids are, we just talked about this. Kids are like sponges. They pick up on how we feel, and when there's conflict amongst adults, that produces stress for the children. So I love when the adults, are being mindful of their language and what they're saying, because it does nothing but stress the children out and cause them to feel uneasy.
Right.
So great conversation. I mean, I love this, and I love that you all are, your job day in and day out is to work with families. I love working with families. I love working with children. I could say I'm not, I had my foot in the water with mediation and stuff, and that was not my thing, but I love doing, like I said, the reunification. I love working to kind of connect children to have healthy relationships with all parents, and every family is going to look different. Divorce happens, and it can happen, as you said, in a healthy way with the right supports and really people being able to work together.
Exactly. And it doesn't mean, you don't have to, it's not, all kumbaya and everybody sits around the table and holds hands and it's all beautiful. In the collaborative, I still am advocating for you, right? So it doesn't have to be a situation where both parents are getting along and everything is wonderful. It's taking steps to put your children first or your goals first, instead of being position-wise, you're solution-based.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I think that's, so many families need that. And when they are in that midst of pain and emotions, it's hard to really see what you need to do, because you can be so caught up in the emotions, the frustration, the anger, the hurt, and it really is kind of creating some stability and boundaries around that. So I appreciate all the work you both are doing. It sounds amazing.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we are to the part you get to answer 3 questions that we ask all of our guests. So you may answer 1, 2, or all 3. It's up to you. The first question is, tell us one of your funny parenting stories. Now, this could also be from your childhood, and you could be talking about your parents. Number 2 is, what TV, family, or movie would you want to be a part of and why? And number 3, what does successful parenting mean to you? So ladies, 1, 2, or 3, you can do whatever, however you want. Take it away.
Emily, I'll let you go first.
Okay. So it's a funny parenting story for myself. So my son, who is now 16, but he was 4 years old at the time, I was home. I had to run outside to the garage to grab something quick. Well, sure enough, he slammed the door shut in the garage and locked it. So here he is in the house, and I was out in the garage. Of course, it was the work day, so my husband was at work, and here I am bounding on the door. You could hear his little giggle in the back, right? Like, he doesn't know that he just locked me out of the house. And thank goodness my neighbor next door is a sheriff, and his son was home, so we had to break the window in the basement. He had to climb in and open the door, and my son was totally fine. He grabbed something in the pantry to eat. He was having a grand old time. But here I was panicking that my son was locked in the house without me. So that was lesson number 1: don't ever go outside without your child.
Oh, that's a good one. That is a good one.
And successful parenting, I think that's really important. So I think it's so important that we are not our children's best friends. I am not here to, giggle with you and tell you everything you want to say. My job is to make you a respectable adult and who is able to go out in this world and take care of themselves. And so maybe years down the line we'll be good friends, but right now my job is to guide you into being a successful person.
Love that. Love
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
All right, Tammy?
Yeah. So I would say, what TV, family, or movie would you want to be a part of, and why? I loved the original Parenthood movie with Steve Martin.
Oh, yes, that was an awesome movie.
I love that movie. You know, part of what I loved about it is, on any given day, like, there was someone or multiple people that were just a hot mess, right? And the family was dysfunctional in some moments and then very functional in some moments. But you could just see that there was this deep love and respect for each other, and they worked through things. And sometimes it was messy and sometimes it was smooth. And I just thought it was so real. And I love movies and TV shows that just depict, you know, authenticity and being real, because as humans, we're just messy, you know, and none of us do it perfectly. And so I love that they could like just share this like messy, real story in such a funny way. So
I like it.
And then successful parenting, to me, I have worked really hard at allowing my kids to have a voice, and especially a voice with me. And so I really, not that it's comfortable, but they will, you know, come to me and say, "Hey, Mom, it really hurt my feelings when you did this," right? And I appreciate that we're able to have a dialogue of like, "Hey, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry, I was a little snarky," right? Like I've had a really long day. I didn't mean it. And I get to model, you know, appropriate apology and owning my stuff. And they get to know that they have a voice, and that in this family, we get to really just be real and authentic with each other. And we don't have to, you know, stuff our feelings down. And so I think that for me, that's an aspect of successful parenting.
I love it.
Love it. Yeah.
Yeah, so great. Well, thank you, Emily and Tammy. We really appreciate you taking time out today and having this conversation. I think it's going to be really helpful for our listeners.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been a lot of fun.
It was very fun. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
You too.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye, Jackie.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us, and make sure to subscribe and like us to catch our next episode, where we will take you on a journey to find new ways of successful parenting.